Welcome everybody. Thank you for joining my session. I would like to start with a round of questions about AI coding assistants. But before I can do that, I would like to have a broad definition of what an AI coding assistant is. So for me, it is a piece of software that helps you write code by using artificial intelligence or machine learning. Okay, who has ever used an AI coding assistant? Quick raise of hands. Okay, I would say 40% of the people. Who used one last month? Still 40%. Last week? Still 40%. Today? A few. Cool, very good. Two more questions about a different topic. Who thinks AI coding assistants will take over our job? And with our job, I mean software development. No hands. Cool. Who thinks AI coding assistants will help us doing our job? Okay, most of the people. Very good. I did not answer this question on purpose because I will circle back to this question later in this presentation. The title of today is the Battle of the AI Coding Assistants. My name is Bouke Nijhuis and I'm the CTO at a company called Sync ICT. And in this talk, I'm going to compare three different AI coding assistants. I will show you the differences. I will give recommendations in the end. In between, I will do live coding demos to show off the features of those assistants. And in the end, I'm going to show you a glimpse of the future, at least the future of AI coding assistants. So I told you there's a battle. That means we have contenders. There are three contenders. And the first contender is called Tab9, also known as Coda. In 2013, an Israeli company was created, and in 2014, they released their first plugin called Coda. I remember people talking about them. I never used it at the time, but they made a small splash in our community. Then in 2019, they bought a company called Tab9, and they renamed the company and the plugin to Tab9, and that's the name they use nowadays. On the right, you see their logo. On the right, yeah. And you will see this logo many times during the presentation, so it would be helpful if you can remember that this is the logo for Tab9. I have a little memory aid for you, and that is the logo has 9 lines, and the company is called Tab9. So the second contender is Copilot from GitHub. It doesn't really need introduction. I think most people know it. So it was released in the summer of 21, so 2 years ago, as a technical preview. And then in the summer of 22, a year later, it became general available. Actually, it is a joint effort between GitHub and OpenAI. OpenAI provides the model called Codex, and GitHub provides, of course, the training material. On the right, you see the logo. It looks like a pilot, so I assume the link to Copilot is an easy one. And the last contender is, of course, ChatGPT from OpenAI. This one really doesn't need an introduction. It took the world by storm last autumn, so only a year ago. Yesterday or the day before, I heard 11 months ago, so it's pretty impressive what it achieved. It made a big splash in our community, but also outside of our community. It even made it into mainstream media. And that's not a thing that happens a lot with developments in IT. On the right, you see the logo of OpenAI. ChatGPT doesn't have its own logo. If you also have troubles remembering this one, the logo has a hole, and the company is called OpenAI. Sorry for the bad memory aids. So, why these three? This is a question I got at a previous conference, and I think it's a very good question, so let's directly address it. More does not fit. I cannot fit more than 3 AI coding assistants in a talk under an hour. Then why Tab9? I think Tab9 was the first AI coding assistant out there. I just told you the company was created in 2013. That is 10 years ago. I think they were years ahead of the competition. Furthermore, they have unique features which I will talk about more later in the presentation. Then we have Copilot. Copilot is currently the biggest name in AI coding space, and that simply earns them a spot. Lastly, we have ChatGPT, and it's the most famous AI assistant out there at the moment. That also earns them a spot. So let's talk about differences. I'm Dutch. Dutch people are famous for being cheap. Thank you, Bruno. So we should talk about costs. On the left, we have the 3 contenders, tab 9, Copilot, and ChatGPT. And then in the first column, you can see if there's a free option. Tab 9 has a free option. It is called tab 9 Starter. I tried it, but it is not as good as the paid option, of course. So for this presentation, I will go for the paid option. Copilot doesn't do free. If you want to use Copilot, you will have to pay. And lastly, ChatGPT does have a free option. That's the version that was introduced about a year ago. The second column shows you what the personal plan costs per month. Every AI coding assistant has a personal plan and a business plan. In this presentation, I will focus on the personal plan and try to ignore the business plan unless there are really unique features in there, then I will mention them. So in the middle, you see the price per month, and in the column on the right called yearly discount, it shows if they do yearly discounts. So tab 9 is 15 euros a month. Unless you pay a year up front, then you get a discount of about 2 months. Copilot is 10 euros, also does do discounts. So if you pay a year up front, you get about 2 months discount. ChatGPT doesn't do discounts, so it doesn't matter if you pay yearly or monthly. Which model I'm going to use exactly? I added this slide a few weeks ago to clarify which model I'm going to use. The world of AI coding assisting is moving at a rapid pace, and this will help you understand which one I'm using exactly. So for tab 9, I'm using the original model, not the chat version that's currently in beta. That one still has a waiting list, and you have to wait before you can use it. Copilot, I'm also using the original one. This one used to have a waiting list. They lifted this requirement 2 weeks ago. So the beta chat version is available, but only if you're using Visual Studio or Visual Studio Code. And I'm doing most of my demos in IntelliJ. And then lastly, ChatGPT. I used to do this presentation with a free version, so version 3.5. But for me, it became too slow. So I decided to start paying. Very smart of them. And so while I'm paying, why not using the best version they have? So I'm using version 4. So next question, is it for coding only? The ones on the left, so tab 9 and Copilot, are for coding only. They run in the IDE as a plugin. The one on the right, ChatGPT in the no column, does not run in your IDE. You can access it through a website or an API. Then how do you provide input? Now, again, the same two assistants on the left, so tab 9 and Copilot, they use existing code as input. So what do I mean with existing code? Class names, method names, documentation, stuff like that. Then on the right, we have ChatGPT. It does not run in your IDE and therefore cannot access your existing code. So you have to prompt it. You can ask it questions or give it commands. The best way to show off the difference between those two techniques is by doing a demo. But before I dive into the demo, I would like to address a few points. So first of all, I'm going to do the demo in Java, because Java is the language I am most familiar with. If you do not really know Java or have another language you prefer, it doesn't really matter. I'll try to stay outside of coding details. I'll try to give a high-level overview. So if you know any other programming language, you should be fine. Secondly, the fact that I'm doing the demos in Java doesn't mean it only works for Java. It should be working for every major programming language out there. And thirdly, doing live demos is kind of tricky, and there's always the chance of things going wrong, as you probably have seen many times. The fact that I need an internet connection makes it even more tricky. But last, I do not exactly know what the AI is going to generate. So you've seen that during other presentations as well. Sometimes the AI does things you don't expect. So every time when I rehearse for this talk, something new happens. So probably today, something new will happen as well. So long story short, don't expect flawless demos. If something horribly goes wrong, no problem. I have a backup movie. So I can show you what I wanted to show you with live coding with a movie. So the thing that we're going to do, we're going to start with tab 9, our first AI coding assistant. See the bottom right, logo of tab 9 lines. What we're going to do is prime number generation. So why are we going to do prime number generation? Because when you are looking for a subject for live coding, it shouldn't be too simple, because the audience is thinking, come on, I can do this with my eyes closed. But it shouldn't also be too hard, because then it's hard to follow along. So I think prime number generation is in the sweet spot. Everybody knows what a prime number is. Everybody knows how to check if something is a prime number, and most of you also know how to generate them. So we have a class called prime number generator. And there's a comment over here. This is called JavaDoc for the people who do not do Java. This is how you document methods. Let's see what it says. It says generate prime numbers up to a given number. Okay. There should be one parameter called n, which is the upper bound of the prime numbers to generate. Lastly, it should return a list of prime numbers. So how does an AI coding assistant work? Now, if it's an IDE-based coding assistant like Tab 9, you install the plugin, and after installing the plugin, you just press enter. And then you wait till you get a suggestion. You can accept the suggestion by pressing tab, or you can press escape to decline it, or you can keep typing, or you can ask for another option. On a Mac, that's option closing square bracket. And if you do that, you see I can choose between the static and the non-static version of this method. I'm going to go for the non-static version. And I'm going to accept this, because this is exactly what I was asking for. I was asking for a return type of list of integer. Perfect. I was asking for one parameter called n, and the name generate also sounds pretty good. So I'm going to press tab to accept it. Okay, now I have an empty method. I'm going to press enter to see if I get an implementation for the method. And look, there it is. Just going to accept it. Okay, this seems fine. There's one red word in there, so there's something wrong. This method expects another method called isPrime to be there. Let's see if the AI gives us that method. Private boolean isPrime, perfectly. So again, I'm just going to keep generating code until I have a main method. And look, there it is. So now I have runnable code. Like I said before, we're not going to focus too much on the details. I'm just going to run the code to see what happens. And as you can see, it gave a long list of numbers that look like prime numbers. I'm not going to check them all. But I think Tab 9 worked perfectly in creating a prime number generator. So well done, Tab 9. Let's see how Copilot compares. So Copilot also runs in your IDE and uses existing code as input. Again, here you install a plugin, you log in, and you press enter to see what happens. And Copilot comes up with this. Public static array of int. I was asking for a list of integer. And then again, one parameter called int n. So I'm not really happy with this result, because actually I wanted a list of integer, like specified over here, list of prime numbers. So this will happen more times during this presentation. Whenever the AI comes up with something you do not really like, you probably haven't been specific enough. In this case, I think I've been pretty specific, but I can be more specific. So let's try that. So I'm going to specify that I want a list of integers containing prime numbers. Let's see if this helps. Hey, look at that. It came up with a new method that returns a list of integers. So being more specific helps. I'm going to accept it, and now, interesting. There are two interesting things. It's missing the same isPrime method as before, so apparently it's trained on the same material. But there's another problem. No, not really a problem. Copilot, in most cases, doesn't add the closing accolade at the end of a method. So I have to add the closing accolade myself. I looked it up on the internet. More people were talking about it. Some people love it, some people hate it. I'm somewhere in the middle. So let's see if Copilot also implements the missing isPrime method. Okay, Copilot comes up with documentation. Cool. It seems to be documentation for an isPrime method, so let's accept it. Let's see what happens next. I hope it will create an implementation for an isPrime method, and there it is. Again, I have to add the closing accolade, and the next thing I really would like is a main method so I can run the program. Copilot decides to do something else. That's logical, because how should it know I'm waiting for a main method? So let's help it a little bit. I'm going to type public space, and let's see what happens. And there's my main method. So sometimes you have to nudge your assistant in the right direction. You have to help it a little bit. And this seems to be runnable code, so I'm going to run the program to see what happens. And I expect it to to print the prime numbers up till 100. It's a little bit, it's different formatted, but it is the same list. And also Copilot is pretty capable of creating a program that generates prime numbers. Now we're going to go to ChatGPT. And ChatGPT is different. I told you before, it doesn't run in your IDE as a plugin. You can access it through the website or an API. I'm going to use the website. This is ChatGPT. And I also told you can ask it questions or give it commands. Let's ask it a question. I'm going to say, please implement this class. So to create a level playing field, it would be fair to give it the existing code. So that's what I'm going to do. And I'm going to paste it here. So I ask ChatGPT questions. I do not give it commands. And people in the past were asking, why do you use please when you're talking to an AI? Now, I think that's a proper question. And there's also a really logical explanation, because a few years ago I saw a movie called Terminator. Yeah, so it doesn't hurt to be nice to an AI, right? So just say please, and maybe it will help you in the future. So while it is creating code, we're not going to focus too much on the code, but if it's done, there's a really nice button over here that says copy code. So ChatGPT is it's really handy that this button is over there. Okay, it's done generating. I'm just going to copy the code. I go back to IntelliJ and I paste it. It seems to be a runnable code, so I'm going to run it. And let's see what happens. I expect it to generate the prime numbers up till 30. And look at that. Those are the prime numbers up till 30. So also ChatGPT is pretty capable of generating a prime number generator. All three assistants did pretty well as far as I'm concerned. So let's continue with the slides. Okay, yeah.
You didn't mention anything about Java in ChatGPT.
Yeah, but I pasted the existing code and it was smart enough to pick up that it was existing code. Very good question. I also tried the same with Bart. It's not in this presentation, but I did it off the side. It came up with Python code. Yeah. Okay, how about speed? Now we've done a few live demos, we can talk about speed. I think we can all agree that Tab 9 and Copilot were faster. The way of interacting with Tab 9 and Copilot is different. I had to press Enter, Tab, Enter, Tab, Enter, Tab. So there are a lot of interactions, but all the suggestions were pretty fast. It came up with suggestions really fast, like millisecond stuff. ChatGPT, first I had to type a question, which takes time. Then I had to wait for it to come up with an answer. I even had to make a joke about Terminator to fill up the time. But especially if you take into account that you have to copy and paste code from your editor to ChatGPT and back again, yeah, then ChatGPT is far slower than the other two. So does it also work offline? On the left, in the kinda column, I have Tab 9. Tab 9 provides an offline mode. I tried it, but it didn't work really well. It's more like the Tab 9 starter, so the free version I told you about in the beginning. It's not as good as the paid online version, so it isn't really good yet, but I do expect it to improve. There's a lot of research at the moment of running large language models, so the models that power AI coding assistants, on your own laptop, and I expect this to improve pretty quickly. On the right, in the no column, we have Copilot and ChatGPT. They do not provide offline modes, so you have to be online to use them. Does it write tests? Now, the best way to show you, of course, is a demo. So let's see if our assistants also are capable of writing tests. The thing that we're going to do, we're going to create tests for the prime number generators. For people who are not familiar with Java, if you want to write a unit test in Java, you, in most cases, use a framework called JUnit. So that's what we're going to do. I'm going to ask the IDE to create a test class for me. I'm just going to take the defaults. And I'm going to press Enter to see what happens. So this is Tab 9. And I pressed Enter, and it came up with the test annotation on the first line, which is a pretty good start for a test. This is how you do unit testing in Java. And then a method is called isPrime. I'm going to accept it, and let's see if it also can come up with an implementation. Assert equals true prime. It says it wants to assert that 2 is a prime number. Let's see if this works. I have to do an import. Now there's a small problem. Probably isPrime is private. Now you shouldn't do this, but for this demo, I'm going to make it public. It's not something you would do, of course, in the real world. And there seems to be another problem. It's non-static. Now we're going to fix that as well for now. Okay, this seems to be a proper test. Let's see if it can come up with more tests. I press enter again to see what happens. So it thinks 3 is also a prime number, which is correct. 5 is a prime number. 7 is a prime number. So this is pretty okay, right? It could also just do 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 and make mistakes. I've seen that happen before. This is pretty good. Let's run it to see what happens. Green test, my favorite test. Okay, let's see if it can come up with more test cases, more test methods. I'm just going to press enter. Now, the funny thing of being on a conference with Wi-Fi, maybe it is slow, maybe it's not working. I'm not going to wait any longer, so I'm just going to help it a little bit. I told you before, if you're not happy with the result, so an empty line, not really happy, you probably haven't been specific enough. So I'm going to be more specific. Test negative input. So I'm going to test an edge case. Let's see what happens. Okay, that comes up with a pretty good start. Press enter again, and okay. Now, you see? Sometimes you hear about hallucination. This is not really hallucination, but it takes something else already there, existing code, and it makes it negative. Now, in this case, I, of course, only need the first line. So I'm going to remove the other lines, but I still think this is correct. Let's see if it runs, because sometimes this just breaks the program. Yeah, that's okay. What we just found was a bug in our code, because if you provide -2, it shouldn't be a prime number, but apparently our code, not our code, there's a bug in there, the AI's code, thinks that is a prime number. So this is really interesting. So by using an AI assistant to come up with test cases, I found a bug. Now, I think that's pretty good. I'm not going to fix it right now because that's not the focus of this presentation. So I'm going to see if it can come up with a third test case. 0 input, which is also a really nice edge case. So let's see what happens if we generate this. Seems to be correct. So it's going to check if if 0 is not a prime number. I think that is correct. And I just pushed the wrong button. Sorry for that. Oh, also gives it true. Interesting. So now we found 2 bugs. I think tab 9 performed admirably. So the goal of this demo was creating test cases, and it did. So it helped me find bugs, which is pretty good. So let's see how Copilot does in the same context. So again, I'm going to use Ask IntelliJ to create a test case defaults, and I'm just going to press enter to see what happens. And now let's accept it and see what happens. So Copilot comes up with this test. Now there are 2 issues with this test. The first one is, of course, the red word over there. It shouldn't be generate primes, but generate. So this happens sometimes that it takes the wrong method name, but it's easily fixed by a human. But the actually big issue, let me fix this for you. It becomes apparent if you do this. Again, it wants to work with an array of integers and not a list of integers, like it did when we were generating the code that's currently in the test. Now, actually, I think you have a few options now. You can be more specific, like I've told more times before, or you can fix it yourself. In this case, I'm going to be more specific. I'm just going to give it a hint. So I'm going to remove this, and I'm going to say test the prime number generator by using a list. Oh, typo. Oh, another typo. Did you know that typing is really hard when you're standing in front of hundreds of people watching you? So if I press enter again, it comes up with something of known primes. I don't really, let's see if I can get a different implementation. No, this is not what I want. Let's help it a little bit by providing the test annotation so it knows I want a test. And now I'm waiting. Is it the Wi-Fi? Will it work? It will work. So I'm going to accept it. Yeah, I already hear people laughing. I think hopefully because of this implementation, not because of my performance. So this is not how a human would implement it, but I think it is a proper unit test. So let's see what happens if we run it. Green check mark. So let's leave it at that. You can always refactor afterwards if you want something different. So let's see if it can come up with a different test. Interesting. Yeah, this is also funny, right? So remember I typed by using a list and it wants to go back to that array. Let's help it a little bit, like I also helped tab 9. Profile test, negative, input. It comes first up with the test annotation. Good start, good start. And this is actually what you would expect if you want to test negative numbers. You provide a -1 and you see what happens. Now let's run this one. I expect another green check mark. There it is. And let's see if it can do a third one. And it comes up with the same test serial input. That's interesting, eh? It's just the same as tab 9. So there are some similarities here. Let's see how it implements it, because that one will probably be different. Yeah, look at that. This is exactly what you want. The input is 0, and we expect an empty list of primes. Okay, let's run all 3 of tests, and I expect 3 green check marks. Yeah. So Copilot is pretty capable of helping you creating test cases. Okay, now we're going to do ChatGPT, and as we all know, since the first demo, ChatGPT is different. So we should talk to ChatGPT. You should not give it commands. You should ask questions. Please create a test class. This is going to take some time, so let's see if we can see what it does while it's generating code. So one of the things I've seen many times during rehearsals for this presentation, that it will generate test cases for the JUnit 4 framework. And that is kind of logical, because I did not specify which framework I'm using. In this case, luckily, it chose JUnit 5. That's the one I also used, so the project is prepared for JUnit 5. I added the right dependencies. And then the first one the first test it comes up with is testing prime numbers up till 30, which I think is a great start. But then it comes up with 10, which is a bit strange. If you want to fail fast, do it the other way around, but okay. Then it tests 2, which is an edge case. 2 is the first prime number, so that's an interesting test case. Then it comes up with 1, which is also kind of an edge case, the first of the lowest positive number that is not a prime number. And 0. 0 is always an edge case, right? So I'm pretty impressed with all the test cases it came up with. So let's see if it also runs, because that's the most important thing. So again, I'm going to create this test class, just take the defaults, and I'm going to replace the empty class with the output of ChatGPT. Oh, and I have to run the entire class, not one. And let's see if all test cases become green. And look at that, green field test cases. So all 3 AI coding assistants were pretty capable of generating tests. I think Copilot performed best. Without hardly any input, it came up with 6 interesting tests. Then the other 2 did nicely, I would say. Does it write documentation? Now, the short answer is yes. During the demo, you saw Copilot come up with documentation for the isPrime method. I didn't even ask for that documentation, and it just came up with it. But it is pretty capable of writing documentations, especially if you want to have Java docs, so documentation of a method. And in most cases, it's just pressing enter on top of a method, and it just provides the documentation. And I'm really, really happy that it writes documentation, because I don't really like to write documentations. Are there more people in the room who don't really like to write documentation? Only half. Apparently the other half loves it. Interesting. So thank you, AI, for taking an annoying job off my list of things to do. So does it write regular expressions? Yes, it does. I have a small confession to make. I am really bad at writing regular expressions. And I assume, I'm not going to ask, I assume there are more people in the room who are not as good at writing a regular expression. And that's perfectly normal, because regular expressions are not for humans, right? Those are for computers and for software. So luckily, our AI friend is also closer to computers and software than it is to humans. Therefore, it's pretty good at writing regular expressions. So if you want a regular expression, you just write it down in a comment in natural language, and the AI will come up with a regular expression. If it doesn't do it correctly the first time, you adjust your comment, or you just give more input when you're talking to ChatGPT, because it remembers context. You can just keep building until you have the perfect regular expression. Can it explain code? The ones on the left, tab 9 and Copilot, in the no column, they cannot explain code. They're pretty good at generating code and generating documentation, but there is no button to ask it questions. On the right, we have ChatGPT. ChatGPT is a chatbot, therefore you can ask it questions, and if you ask ChatGPT to explain code, it will do it pretty well. I'm actually pretty impressed every time when I use this functionality, how well it can explain code. To be really fair, Copilot is currently in the no column. If you run Copilot in VS Code, you can install another plugin, and that has a button that can explain code. But I think that's too much of a hassle, so I just put it in the no column. Can it find bugs? Now again, we have tab 9 and Copilot on the left in the no column. It can generate code, it can generate documentation, but I don't know how to ask it questions. ChatGPT, you can just ask, find bugs, and again, it's uncanny how well it's able to spot bugs in my code. Maybe not in your code, but it's pretty good at spotting bugs in my code. Yeah, and the last one is more of the same. If you want to refactor code, you have to ask a question. The ones on the left, I don't know how to do it. With ChatGPT, you just ask for a refactoring, and it's capable of doing that. So the last 3 slides really showed the difference between having a chat interface and not having a chat interface. If you do not have a chat interface, you cannot ask questions, and therefore you miss out on a lot of features. So the next topic is privacy. It's a topic that gets more and more attention while talking about AI assistants. Yeah, it's okay. Yeah.
Do they provide functionality for, normally you have your utility classes with methods that you want to reuse in your code. Do they scan your code to propose those utility functions?
Yeah, let me repeat the question. Sorry for people who are looking this at YouTube. I didn't do this for the previous question. So the question is, does it also look in the other files of your project? That's your question, right? Yeah. The answer is the AI coding assistants that run in your RDE as a plugin do have access to all the open tabs. At the moment, they do not read the entire project. But you also saw when I was doing the demo with building the test cases, it used the wrong method name. If it was reading the original code, it should have picked the right method name. So it's capable of reading it, but doesn't always use it. I know at GitHub, at the Copilot team, there are people busy with a version of Copilot that's capable of reading your entire project. So not only the open files, but just all the files in your project. So this is something that is coming in the future, but it's not there yet. Okay, privacy, yeah. So how does tab 9 do privacy? Tab 9 never stores or shares any of your code. They have something called ephemeral processing. So tab 9 cannot work with input. So your code goes to the server. They use your existing code to come with an answer, a proposal. But after that, they just delete everything. They never store or share any of your code. And this is how it should be. This is like, you can't do better than this, right? You need the input, you need the output, afterwards you just throw it away. Unfortunately, the other two are not as black and white as this. So Copilot, remember it had 2 plans, an individual plan and a business plan. Both plans store user engagement data. You cannot opt out of this, so it will always happen. What is user engagement data? Whenever you call Copilot, they store the time it took to come up with a reply Did you accept the reply? Did you decline it? Did you ask for an alternative? Stuff like that. That is user engagement data, the context, let's call it like that. Then the personal plan also stores your prompts, the input, and the suggestions, the output, by default. You can opt out of this, but if you forget to do so, it will use your code. It will go to Copilot and it will stay there. And in this case, storing means available for training. And this is how you lose your data. This is how the data leaves your company. To sum it up, you can opt out of most of those things. So you can prevent that your code is leaving your company, but you have to do things by yourself if you use the personal plan. The business plan by default does not store prompts and suggestions. And then we have ChatGPT. All ChatGPT plans store data for at least 30 days. You cannot opt out of this. The reason is they want to check for malicious behavior. If you use the free of personal plan, they use by default the chats for training. You can opt out of this, but if you forget this, your questions and answers are used for training. If you use the business plan or use the API, your data is not used for training. So just be aware, if you do not turn it off, it can be used for training. So, conclusion. Will AI help us doing our job? I think after seeing the demos and this presentation, I think most people will say yes. Unfortunately, it is not perfect. We've seen the AI do really good stuff, but also really not so good stuff. It still needs human supervision. And that's a good thing, because that's the reason that we still have jobs. What's the most important thing, I think, when you use AI coding assistants is that you keep the problem small. Remember, I talked about prime number generation. So not too small, but also not too big, somewhere in the middle. The AI is pretty capable of building those things. And the last thing, be specific. If you're not happy with the result, be specific. The more information you give to the AI, the better the results will be. So how will the AI help you? I think it will be first and foremost your pair programmer. And I also remember Stefan saying during the keynote that this is how he programs together with his AI coding assistant. I think together you will write quality code faster. Let's dive a little bit deep on all the situations we had. Sometimes the AI came up with perfect solutions. You cannot beat that as a human. Sometimes we had to nudge the AI in the right direction, but then it came up with a pretty good solution. You cannot beat this as a human. Some cases the AI came up with something, but you had to fix it as a human. I think that's still faster than together you are still faster than if you have to start from scratch as a human. And even in the cases where the AI messed up, we've seen this as well, it makes you think about the problem. And the more you think about problems, the better your solution will be that you will write afterwards yourself. So I think there is an upside in every case. So recommendations. I personally prefer ChatGPT because it gives me the best results. During the demos, especially with the test cases, it hardly needed any input and it came up with pretty good test cases. Furthermore, I really like the fact that it has a chat interface. It enables unique features like asking for bugs, asking for explanations, or asking for, what was the third one? Asking for refactorings. Thank you. But it is kind of slow. I have to type a question, I have to wait for an answer, but it becomes even worse if you take into account the copy and pasting. The copy and pasting from code from your IDE to your browser is really annoying and becomes really irritating pretty quickly. So when should you use Copilot? You should use Copilot when you want IDE integration. Read if you do not want to copy and paste. In my opinion, it is better than Tab9, and it's a fact that it's cheaper than Tab9. So, is there also a business case for Tab9? Yes, there is. You should use Tab9 when security or privacy is an issue. Why? Tab9 provides an offline mode. Now, the best way to stay secure or private is, of course, not going on the internet. But you probably also remember that I didn't really like the offline mode. So luckily, they also have the next best thing. And that is self-hosting. It is in the business plan, so you have to pay extra over it. But you can run the Tab9 servers in your own network. And that's the next best thing to staying offline. The data does not leave your own network. Lastly, Tab9 has the best privacy features. It never uses or stores any of your data. So if your security and or privacy is important to you, use Tab9. Okay, I promised you a glimpse of the future. Unfortunately, you have... No, let me start over. I like all 3 AI coding assistants I've been demoing today. All 3 of them do a nice job. But actually, I want the best of both worlds. I would like to have an IDE plugin that can access my existing code, but I also want something that I can chat with. So what I want is an IDE plugin with a chat interface. And luckily for me, everybody is heading in that direction. Tab9 is building something called Tab9 Chat. GitHub Copilot is building something called Copilot Chat. And as you all know, JetBrains is building something called AI Assistant. All those 3 things are IDE plugins with chat interfaces. Now, normally at this moment in my presentation, I give a demonstration of JetBrains AI Assistant, but everybody already got a demonstration of JetBrains AI Assistant, so I'm going to do one of Copilot Chat. So let me start Visual Studio Code. I created a really small program called the calculator, and it has only one method. It adds 2 integers. So this is Copilot Chat, not the Copilot I used before. First I have to sign in. And let me make this bigger. So, now, the nice thing about having an IDE plugin that can chat is that you can select some code and then you can press a shortcut and you can start reasoning about your code. Now let's see what it can do. One of my favorites, I already told you, is add documentation. Let's keep it short. You press enter and you wait for the result. Sometimes it's pretty quick, sometimes it takes a bit longer, but hey, it's a few seconds. You get a div on the left, the old code, on the right, the new code. It seems to be pretty good documentation, so I'm just going to accept it by clicking here. And voila, you have code, or you have documentation for your code. Let's see what it can do more. Oh, wrong button. So if you press /, you get a few pre-made things. So let's try the explain. What happened on the left came a panel and it started explaining the code. So it tells me it's a calculator and it can do additions. And like I told you before, it's pretty good at explaining stuff. And if you want more, you just ask for more explanations. If you want to go deeper, if you would need more details. So while we in this panel, let's see if we can do something like adding code. Please add multiplication. If it works properly, and normally it does, it adds a multiplication method. Now you can already, if you can read quickly, if you can scan, the code is here. The easiest way to get it on the right is by using this simple button over here, insert a cursor, and as you can see, it added a multiply method. Who needs the code anymore? You just tell your AI assistant what you want and it will provide it for you, as long as it's a small problem. It can also fix bugs, but there are currently not really bugs in here. Oh, that's an interesting thing. Let's try this one first. So if I do this, and you can do / and then you say fix, it will try to find problems and also propose fixes if it can find a problem. Now, in this case, there is no problem. The code is really simple. But in one of my, not in one, in several of my rehearsals, it came up with, I couldn't find a real issue, but do you notice that you're adding 2 integers? So if you want to add up 2 real big numbers, this is not going to work. And I think that's a really nice way of helping me finding edge cases or things that I did wrong. What I'm going to do, I'm going to introduce a bug on purpose. So don't do this at home. Huh? Don't introduce bugs on purpose. Select the code and I'm going to ask it to fix it. Let's see if it's capable of finding those logical errors, because the code is compiling, it's correct code, but the name of the method is add, but what it does is subtraction. And if you look closely, can you see it on the screen? Yeah, you have to look really closely. there's a red background with a minus and a green background with a plus. So it wants to remove the minus and add a plus sign. So it's pretty capable of finding bugs as well. Let's accept this. How am I doing? Yeah, perfectly. One more thing I want to show off. This is probably something you will never do, but it's just to show off the unlimited potential of AI coding assistants. And that's please translate the documentation in Spanish. Are there people in the room who speak Spanish? Because I don't speak Spanish. So now, can you? Does it look like Spanish? Suma dos en toros. Nah, I think it's Spanish. So and like I said before, this is not something you probably will do, but it's one thing I could come up with. And there are so many things you could come up with and use the AI assistant to do it for you. The potential is limitless as far as I'm concerned. So let's wrap up. If you have questions, please come to me down here. I think that's easier. People who want to leave can leave, and you can ask your question to me, and we can just have interaction. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Thank you for listening to me. I hope everybody learned at least a new thing. Please provide feedback in the app, and enjoy the remainder of the conference. Bye-bye.